Welcome to GED Mastery. Let's get into some algebra here with writing algebraic expressions. So let's look at some vocabulary we'll need first. When you see the word sum, know that that means adding. When you see the word difference, know that that means you're going to be subtracting. Product means multiply, but in algebra, since you're going to be using variables that look like the multiplication symbol, we're going to be using parentheses often to talk about multiplication. Sometimes you'll also see a dot. That means to multiply too. And quotient means divide, and in algebra you'll see that expressed as a fraction or with a slash mark instead of the typical division symbol that you've seen so far, like that. Some more vocabulary you'll see if you see them talking about a number and you don't know what that number is, you're going to represent that with a letter. And often we'll just use X, and this is exactly why we don't use that as the multiplication symbol. We use those parentheses instead. But any letter will do. When they say that you're squaring something, you're raising it to the second power. And if you're cubing something, you're raising it to the third power. And the word is means equals. So let's look at a quick example. Write an expression for the sum of 6 and a number. So the sum means adding. So we're going to add the two things that they say next. So we have 6 and a number. Here we're going to represent that with X or Y or P, whatever. So the sum of 6 and a number would be 6 plus X. Let's look at more questions like this, and we'll see some word problems toward the end. Which expression shows the difference of a number divided by 2 and 5? So we want the difference. We know we're going to be subtracting. So we're going to be subtracting two things. A number divided by 2 is the first thing, and 5 is the second thing we're subtracting. So a number divided by 2, we don't know what that number is, so this part, a number, will be X. So X divided by 2, we can show that like this. And we want the difference between that and 5. So we're going to subtract 5 from that. So the answer choice that matches that is D. And I do recommend trying to do this without looking at the answer choices first, because you could be misled by the answer choices. Number 2, which expression shows 6 less than a number multiplied by 25? So 6 less than means that we're going to be subtracting 6 from something, right? Like if we have 12 less than 18, that would be 18 minus 12. So if they say 6 less than, we're going to have minus 6 at the very end. 6 less than a number multiplied by 25. So whenever we have just a plain number multiplied by something, we just write it next to the variable, the letter. So that is 6 less than a number multiplied by 25. Number 3, which expression shows 3 times the difference of a number and 7? So here's where we're going to have a multiplication situation that's a little bit more complicated than what we just saw, because we're going to multiply 3 times everything that follows, right? Because we're multiplying by the difference of a number and 7. Let's do that part first. So the difference of a number and 7 would look like that. Remember, difference means subtract. And then we want to multiply that whole thing by 3. So here's where we have to use those parentheses, because we're multiplying the difference. And since we can't actually subtract that, we're going to use parentheses here. So I used X, but all the answer choices have S. Fine. It doesn't really matter what letter you use, but our answer is closest to C. Which expression shows the square of the quotient of a number and 3? Okay, so let's do this part first. The quotient of a number and 3. Quotient means divide, and we can show that in a fraction. So that part would look like this. And since we're squaring that whole thing, we want to put that whole thing in parentheses, and then we can square it. And if you simplified this, you'd have to square the top and the bottom. So that would look like that, right? So B is our answer. Let H represent Mark's height in inches. Suzanne is 7 inches shorter than Mark. Write an algebraic expression that represents Suzanne's height in inches. Okay, so this is kind of a simple version of what you might see on the GED test, but it's a good starting point for these word problems. So H is Mark's height, right? And if Suzanne is 7 inches shorter than Mark, we would subtract 7 from Mark's height, right? So that would be B. 6. A company rents bicycles for a fee of $10 plus $4 per hour of use. $4 per hour of use. Write an algebraic expression for the total cost in dollars for renting a bicycle for H hours. Okay, if we're renting it for H hours and it's $4 per hour, we're going to want to multiply 4 times H, and we can show that just by writing them right beside each other. And then that fee of $10 is just a one-time fee, so we'll add that on to that total. And sometimes if you're doing this, you can think of a real-world situation, like if I rented it for 2 hours, how much would that be? So I would do 2 times 4 plus the initial fee of 10, right? So that would be 8 plus 10, or $18. And I could also substitute that number, the 2, for 2 hours into my expression to get the total 2. 4 times 2 plus 10, I also get 18. So you can check your work with a real-world situation to see if it makes sense. So our answer would be C. Number 7. The Jones family is taking a trip from Seattle, Washington to San Diego, California over the course of 3 days. They plan on traveling 200 miles more on the second day than they will on the first day. They will travel 75 miles less on the third day than they will on the first day. Which expression shows the total distance traveled? Okay, we have to come up with a variable, and since they're traveling more on the second day than the first day, let's say that the first day is X miles, X number of miles. So then the second day, if they traveled 200 miles more than this first day, we'll have to add the first day's number of miles with 200. Then for the third day, they traveled 75 miles less on the third day than on the first day. So we could take that first day and subtract 75. Now, if we want the total distance, we would have to add all of these together. So we would have the first day, which is X, plus the second day, which is X plus 200, plus the third day, which is X minus 75. And we'll talk about simplifying these expressions in another video, but the answer choice that most clearly matches that is B, and they just had the first day here instead of in the first position, but it doesn't matter. You can add in any order. Let me know how you feel about writing algebraic expressions in the comments. You've got this.